I am Dracula.
Hello and welcome to this week's Dead Creepy podcast. You're listening to Claire Barrand and Linzi Smith coming to you all the way from South Wales, UK. Hi Linzi.
Hiya.
Hi. We're very happy this week, aren't we? We have a very special guest for you.
Yes, we are, yes.
We're very excited to introduce to you Miss Katherine Tilling M.A, international English literature lecturer and expert in many topics, and tonight she has agreed to come on and talk to us all about Dracula in a Dracula special. So Katherine, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for asking me. Good evening, Claire, and good evening, Linzi. I'm very much looking forward to being on your show, so thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Absolute pleasure to have you. And,
thank you.
Very impressive resume. So how many years have you taught the subject of English literature?
For 12 years.
Wow. That's fantastic.
Seems longer.
Does it really?
It does, I'm afraid, yeah.
So currently, you are teaching at a college in Manchester City, is that right?
Indeed it is, Claire, yes, that's right.
And you've previously taught these subjects in... You couldn't get much further away than New Zealand, am I right?
Oh, yes, I know, indeed, yes.
So you did 3 years out in Auckland, New Zealand.
Yeah, it was probably more like 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah, but it seemed like 3 years.
So you've come on the show to talk especially about Dracula because it's one of your specialist topics. And
it is indeed, yes.
So let's make a start with Dracula because obviously everybody knows he's a vampire and he's one of the oldest, am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong because you're the expert here, but one of the oldest vampires on record.
I think what I would say about Dracula is that he's probably the most famous literary vampire.
Right.
And because Dracula by Bram Stoker was written in 1897. And it's a Gothic novel, so of course it embraces superstition and paranormal activity. But it was Dracula wasn't the first literary vampire, but I think, Claire, that I would class him as the most famous.
That certainly is true, isn't it? He's a very old vampire. So written in 1897. So
yes.
Is there a record of any vampires being written about prior to Dracula?
Yeah, in about 1840, a French writer called Sheridan Le Fanu wrote a vampire novel called Carmilla. But the vampire in Carmilla was a beautiful woman who also happened to be a lesbian. So if you think that paranormal fiction like Dracula can kind of like subvert people's expectations and write about unexpected topics, of course, for the time, if you get my drift.
Yeah. Absolutely, I was going to say that's quite a controversial subject for those times, isn't it?
Indeed, yeah. Completely.
Wow.
Yes.
The people that would have read the book then would probably have been quite shocked, I guess, by the story.
I think that Dracula's original readers, there would have been an element of shock because he is quite subversive and quite controversial, Bram Stoker, particularly in his presentation of women. But if you think at this time, this is right at the end of the Victorian era, there was a lot of interest in supernatural topics such as hypnotism and sleepwalking. So even though some aspects of the story would have been shocking, in other ways it did tap into quite a lot of interest people had at that time in history.
That's interesting, yeah. So Could you give us a brief outline? Obviously, Dracula fanatics will know exactly the story, but I would like to know briefly what's the story with Dracula, because there's so much.
Well,
Is he a fictional character, or
he
was
is
he
indeed,
based
yes.
on? Right, okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure whether he was based on someone, or I mean, obviously, yeah, we don't know about vampires that exist, but yeah, I wondered if someone inspired him.
Yeah, Lindsay, that's a very, very good question, because
Right.
one influence of Dracula was the Romanian king Vlad the Impaler,
Right.
who you could say that like legends associated with Vlad the Impaler have inspired some of the gory imagery, if you like, in Dracula. But also, if you think, vampires are very much an important aspect of Romanian folklore. And of course, Dracula's castle is in Transylvania in Romania. So if you think, vampires are really kind of like an essential part of folklore, and this most prominent really in Romania, Eastern Europe. So yeah, it is fiction, but it is drawing out of myth and legend, if you like. So I sound a bit pissed. I'm not, can I just say? I just sound it.
Well, I've got a nice glass of wine. Have you, Lindsay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have as well. I'm just eyeing it. Yeah, I'm going to enjoy drinking it later on. Yeah,
I'm on the right show. I'll have to tell you that.
I'm getting, yes. I'm
We're
getting
not
that. I'm
alcoholics.
getting good vibes.
Okay, so you're an English literature teacher. So Bram Stoker wasn't Romanian, am I right?
No, he was Irish, Claire.
Right.
Oh.
And he was very interested in Irish politics, particularly the movement for Irish freedom. And as his personal life goes, he was quite square and quite traditional.
Really?
He was quite prudish. He even tried to put forward censorship of certain texts, and that always surprises me, because when you read Dracula, some of it's violent, it's gruesome, and there's quite a lot of sexual undertones as well. So he's a kind of a man that, even though he led a very conventional life, it was kind of like his fiction was a way to explore maybe a different side of him, you could say. So he's an interesting guy, is Bram Stoker.
I'll say. What else? Has he obviously written other things as well as Dracula?
Yeah, but it's just Dracula's his most famous. If anyone says Bram Stoker, just Dracula
Instantly,
just springs to
Dracula.
mind. Yeah, instantly. Yeah.
So getting to the actual story of Dracula.
Yes.
Obviously, there's been movies made, and I'm sure that they have added their own creative take on the story. So have. Yes. So we're talking about the original book today.
Yes.
By Bram Stoker. So getting it right back to how Dracula was written
back to basics.
originally.
Yes.
So tell us briefly, if you can summarise his story.
I will indeed. First of all, what's important when you're reading Dracula is readers will notice it's made up of letters, diaries and journals. So it's not really written in a conventional way. And it's actually called an epistolary novel because, as I say, it's composed of letters from different people, journals, and even voice recordings as well. So it's also reflecting the new technology as well at the end of the Victorian era. But as you said, Claire, I'll give you a brief resume of the story. Okay. Now, it starts off with a guy called Jonathan Harker. And he works for the legal profession. He's a clerk, and he's very young and quite innocent. And he is asked to travel to Romania in Eastern Europe regarding the sale of a property. And he's really out of his comfort zone, and he's really nervous, and he keeps writing letters to his girlfriend called Mina Harker. And when he gets to the inn, which is near Castle Dracula, the landlady warns him about not going to the castle and she keeps crossing herself as well. But anyway, to cut a long story short, and all kinds of shenanigans happen on the way. But when he meets Dracula in the castle, Dracula's really, really old. He's got really long fingernails and long white hair, and there's something quite repulsive about him. But at the same time, there's something attractive about him as well. And that's typical of Gothic literature, because of course Dracula is a Gothic text, a second wave Gothic text. And often the heroes, or anti-heroes if you like, are both repulsive and attractive at the same time. But anyway, to cut a long story short, Jonathan Harker finds himself imprisoned by Dracula, and he can't get out of the castle, and then these very, very attractive, sex-crazed vampires try to seduce him. But at the same time that he's imprisoned in the castle, Dracula is plotting his own journey to England. And to cut a long story short, Jonathan eventually escapes from Dracula's castle, but at the same time, Dracula himself ends up going to England, because remember, he's purchased a property in England called Carfax. And this is interesting in itself, because Dracula, of course, is Romanian and, from Eastern Europe. And at the time, in 1897, there was lots of fears among the British public of invasion. There was lots of xenophobic attitudes, and people were also frightened about the collapse of the British Empire. So, of course, if you think, end of the Victorian era, 1897, there were lots of tensions. And you could say that Dracula leaving Romania and travelling to England just really reflected some of the fears entrenched in the British consciousness at the time, really. So it would have had resonances with the original audience.
Yeah, I'd say that there's that consciousness today.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Lindsay. I think I would say that's probably one of the reasons why Dracula is still such an enduring text, that even though some of its concerns were some of the concerns obviously still apply today, some of these fears of the unknown, if you like, fear of foreigners. So even though it's very much of its time, you could also say it's timeless as well, and that it's modern in some respects. I think that's a really interesting point. But I'm just trying to think how I can concisely tell you the rest of the story. I think really, essentially, Dracula, obviously, he does some bad things. He preys on young women, particularly a woman called Lucy Westenra, who he turns into a vampire. He also preys on Jonathan's wife, Mina, and this group of men called the Crew of Light, which are led by a guy called Van Helsing, eventually, at the end of the story, kill Dracula, and his power is vanquished. And you could say at the end of the text, God has overpowered evil. But what I'd like to say is, unlike vampire texts that we see today, where vampires are seen in a positive light, like think of Twilight. Dracula was through and through evil. He was considered to be an evil, corrupting force that had to be stopped. So I think it's interesting about how the vampire narrative has evolved. Because of course our modern vampires like Edward Cullen aren't evil, and people
in fact, they are portrayed as quite sexy nowadays. So interesting what you were saying about Jonathan Harker being seduced by the three female vampires when he was trapped in Dracula's castle. There's something quite erotic about a vampire as well. So was Dracula portrayed in any? You say when Jonathan Harker first met him, he was an ugly
old man,
strange old man. But did he? Was his appearance like that all the time? Because I'm sort of remembering he could change.
Yeah, he had. If you think Dracula contains lots of paranormal ingredients, which is in keeping with the Gothic genre, and Dracula can actually change physical form. So sometimes he is seen in a younger state. Sometimes he can shapeshift, and he can even substance shift. And sometimes he's just seen as red mist. So he's very, very changeable. And what we refer to that, but he does sometimes have the semblance of a human. But if you think with the vampire and Dracula typifying this, he's neither living nor dead, and what we call that in Gothic literature is liminality, and that is when you are between two states. And you could argue that ghosts are in a liminal space, because ghosts are neither living nor dead.
Is that a transitional state?
No, it's forever.
Oh, really?
Forever, yeah. Because if you think, Dracula he's known as Nosferatu, but he's also known as the undead, because he does obviously have the semblance of a living man, but at the same time he's physically died. So he's in between living and death, life and death.
And so he died at the end, so how could they kill him if he was...
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because a vampire is physically dead already, but is living in this liminal space. So if you think vampires don't age, they don't have any human needs, but to ultimately kill someone in vampire form, traditionally it was thought you have to cut off the head, stuff their mouth with garlic, and drive a stake through their body. And that indeed is what happens to Lucy Westenra, who Dracula bites her, and he completely drains her of her blood. And the doctor that's looking after her and Van Helsing, the vampire specialist, they can't understand why every night she loses blood, but there's no sign of how she lost the blood. So she dies because all her blood has been sucked away, but then as the vampire she comes back to life. And when she is finally killed, what they have to chop off her head, stuff her mouth with garlic, and drive a stake, which is deliberately phallic. They drive this stake through her heart, and it's said that if you kill a vampire like that, then you can save their immortal soul. So by killing Lucy Westenra as a vampire, they've actually saved her soul.
Wow.
Right.
That's really
and was it Bram Stoker's Dracula that first invented this kind of vampire half-bite thing, where they don't kill a victim but turn them into a vampire? Is that where it started, or was that known prior to
that? That is characteristic of that. Does appear in Romanian folklore as well.
Oh, okay, right.
But obviously Bram Stoker has developed that ideology, if you like.
Right.
Wow.
And that's where we get things like the Twilight Saga. And
I love Twilight. I have to say, I really love Twilight.
I do. I like Twilight.
I think the books are very well written, actually.
The whole image of Dracula, I think of him as a bat. So he sometimes would turn into a bat. Is that right?
Yeah, he can shapeshift.
So, but he never was half human, half bat. He was either one or the other. Is that right?
Yes.
That's interesting. That's really fascinating, because there's so many different types of folklore character, and we've got some folklore characters that are human with huge wings. So obviously he's not one of those. He's a species all of his own. And when it comes to the blood thing, he drinks the blood. That's for him. He literally lives on that. He doesn't.
Yes.
So
that renews him. That regenerates him.
But and where does it come in with the whole virgins thing? Is it got to be female blood, or is that another myth?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you should say that, actually, because if you think, obviously Bram Stoker was fighting a battle to a certain extent with Victorian censorship, so he had to be careful not to make his novels too graphic. But he does, one of his victims, his first victim, in actual fact, when he gets to England, because he comes to England concealed in this ship called the Demeter, and he lands at Whitby. It's funny talking about Whitby. I took my students on a college trip to Whitby, and we went to Whitby Abbey, and we even went and visited this bench where in Bram Stoker's Dracula, Lucy Westenra was first bitten by Dracula, and Mina is following her because Lucy has been sleepwalking, and Mina sees this hovering shape over Lucy, and the Gothic symbolism, because there's a reference to St. Mary's Church being dramatically, the steeple being dramatically obscured by cloud. So that's just showing Dracula emphatically as an evil character, and an evil character here who preys on young women. Because Lucy Westenra is about to be married to a woman. Sorry, a bit of a Freudian slip there. But there is quite a lot of homoerotic touches to Dracula, but Lucy's about to be married to a bloke called Arthur Homewood, and of course when Dracula preys on her, technically she is a virgin, and there's a thought obviously of, well, there's all sorts of sexual connotations there, but it's
brilliant.
But I think that's probably instrumental with this is the thought of Dracula being a predator, having predatory attitudes towards women. Now it's interesting because after Lucy Westenra has been killed, both in her woman's form and then her vampire form, Jonathan starts to prey. Dracula starts to prey on Mina Harker, who by this time is married. She's Jonathan Harker's wife. They were engaged at the start of the story, but they get married during the novel, and there's a very, very memorable scene in Dracula when there's this lunatic asylum. It is very, very significant, and in the asylum there's a character called Renfield who is being controlled by Dracula. If you think Dracula preys on the weak and the people that are easy to manipulate, if you like. But there's one, before Renfield dies, he tells Van Helsing and the crew of Light that he thinks that Dracula has been feeding off Mina, and the men barge into Mina and Jonathan's room, and Jonathan Harker, the main character, is just in a stupor. He's like passed out, and this is quite interesting because this is the manipulation of the Victorian male hero, because obviously a male hero in 1897 was supposed to be strong and able to protect his woman, but Jonathan is just in a stupor, and Dracula is actually in their room, and Mina is in her nightdress, and her nightdress is covered with blood, and Mina is drinking Dracula's blood out of an open artery in his chest. The imagery is horrible. It says that the pair of them, there is a likeness, this is a direct quote from the novel, that it's like a kitten having its nose pushed into a saucer of milk and being forced to drink. So you can imagine how shocking and grotesque that image was of this idea of Dracula preying, like on young women, in his quest for overall power and dominance. But though, and you were talking about this before, Claire, obviously you've got Dracula who's seen as a predator, but also you were saying before, Claire, in chapter 1 to 4, when Jonathan is in prison in Dracula's castle, and these three very, very sexy vampires try to seduce him. And it's interesting because the man, i.e. Jonathan, is considered to be completely powerless, and the women have all the power, and they're trying to initiate sex with him, and he's obviously, he can't wait, and he says that he's looking at the vampires through his eyelashes, and of course that's a really feminine kind of gesture.
And he doesn't know that they're vampires at this point.
No, but
right.
You said, Claire, before about the eroticism of the vampire and vampire literature. He doesn't know they're vampires, but he's completely in awe of them, and he is desperate for them to initiate sex and take him. Yeah. And of course, that's a real role reversal of the expected role between men and women in Victorian times, because women were expected to be passive and men were expected to be the ones initiating sex. Yeah. But here it's the complete role reversal. And Jonathan Harker's emasculated, really. He's stripped of his power, and the three women have this power over him. So it's a weird text in terms of its representations of women, because sometimes women, they are represented as passive objects, but at the same time, the presentation of the female vampires is of strong, assertive women that really challenge the very foundations of Victorian society. So you can tell that I'm really into Dracula, and I think it's very rewarding read, because there's lots to it,
I think it sounds like it's demonstrating like the manipulation of giving over your will,
Yes.
A manipulation of agreeing to an act of taking.
It's like,
it's like in this case, blood. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because of course what the female vampires want from Jonathan is his blood. Yeah. And there's a reference to their teeth, one of the women's teeth, just pricking the skin of his neck. But of course he is just completely, he's very sexually aroused, and he is expecting a sexual consummation, whereas the consummation they've got in mind is rather more different. Because there's a lot in the novel as well, this is a bit gross, but about sharing bodily fluids. And of course when Mina is drinking Jonathan's blood, that really, really would have shocked the audience at the time, because obviously that's an intimate act of sharing bodily fluids that does have sexual connotations. Also, the reference in...
I was just wondering, so did Bram Stoker have certain censorships applied to this literature when he first wrote it? No. So nobody tried to shut it down, nobody tried to unpublish it?
Well, it was funny, though, because we were talking about this before, Lindsay. Essentially, because it was a Gothic text, he was dealing with the paranormal. You could get away with dealing with controversial topics simply because it was a book about the paranormal. It had elements of fantasy rather than reality. So that allowed him to circumvent, if you like, some of the restrictions of the day.
So if he'd have been writing a novel about, let's compare it to some of the other novels written at the time of people, they wouldn't have been allowed obviously in the mid-Victorian period, you had Charles Dickens. Right. I'm a great Dickens fan, but Dickens was all about social realism. Yeah. So you wouldn't
real people and poverty and the gap between the rich and the poor, and it was a plea for more liberal attitudes, if you like. But I think because Bram Stoker, he was embracing the supernatural and the paranormal, he could challenge boundaries in a way other writers might not have been able to have done. Because Dickens does write about controversial attitudes like sex before marriage and pregnancy outside of marriage and the fallen woman. But Dickens was, I suppose, trying to alert his readers to all these inequalities that existed in his society in more of a realistic way, whereas Bram Stoker just embraces the whole Gothic genre and the impossibilities, I guess, that Gothic literature can trigger.
So he could cross boundaries because it was the genre in which he was writing that allowed him.
Exactly. Yes.
And because he was writing about stuff that was
embracing. I think you're embracing, the possibilities of the Gothic genre in just breaking the boundaries, really, and being able to address fantastical subjects. Because say if anyone had complained, the automatic answer was, well, this isn't reality. This is a Gothic novel.
Yeah, so
it's doing something very different.
So people they might have bought the book and they might have found it quite exciting to read and erotic or whatever. However, they would have incredibly. This is horror, a horror genre as well now.
Totally gothic horror at its finest. Claire.
It is, and if they'd have so they would have. It kind of allowed them to indulge in those fantasies, perhaps.
It certainly did. Now, if you read a biography of Bram Stoker, on the surface, he lived a very conventional life. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of hidden tensions below the surface of this very respectable life. You may have heard of a guy called Henry Irving, who Bram Stoker was his personal assistant at the Lyceum Theatre. And it has been suggested that maybe there were hidden tensions in that relationship, that there was a possible homoeroticism that maybe Bram Stoker explores in Dracula through his presentation of the male characters and their crew of light. So it's quite interesting, your idea about indulging in fantasy. Maybe writing Dracula was a way for Bram Stoker to indulge in fantasies that perhaps weren't acceptable, like at the time, if you like.
Absolutely. So what do we think inspired him to write it? I mean, obviously there's that, but so if there was other references to vampires before he wrote it, was there anything else? There was a particular piece of art that was out at the time.
Oh gosh, yeah, The Vampire by Philip Burne-Jones.
One of the pre-Raphaelite artists.
Yeah,
and was that out before Bram Stoker's wrote Dracula?
It was, marginally, yes.
Because that's quite a sexy painting, isn't it?
And you see, now that you're talking about the Victorian audiences being shocked, people were very, very shocked by that painting because it features a man being seduced by a sexually voracious female vampire, and obviously that was pretty crucial for the power dynamic at the time, that women were considered to be passive and men were considered to be active. Just want to point something else out as well, that in the 1890s, the movement towards women's liberation was very much gaining momentum. And it was particularly in the 1890s that Victorian women were being were dissatisfied by the constraints of the traditional roles they were expected to play in society. And there was another writer, not a Gothic writer, more a social realist called George Gissing, who writes novels called New Woman fiction. And that's all about women wanting traditional fulfillment, but wanting to move into the workplace, earn a living, and wanting sexual equality and liberation. And if you think that painting by Edward Burne-Jones, even though it embraces fantasy and the whole Gothic kind of genre at the time, it's registering women's battle for equality, if you like. So, and of course,
and what was his novel Dracula at the time in particularly was it popular amongst women readers, or is there no way of knowing that?
I don't think there's a way of definitively knowing that, but I just think that it's just, it's interesting because the female vampires are portrayed as assertive and sexually adventurous, sexually wanting sexual fulfillment. And I've mentioned a woman called Mina Harker, who's married to Jonathan Harker. She in some ways could be labelled as a new woman because she's a school teacher, she learns shorthand, and in the 1890s lots of women were wanting to work in offices. They thought that was important to entry to the workplace, if you like. So in Dracula there are obviously the elements of fantasy, but there are some elements of some realistic elements, really, like Mina learning shorthand and learning, and typing and those kind of things, which reflects the new technology of the time as well.
And so I'm assuming you've seen the latest films that have been done about Dracula. How much do they differ to the original novel?
Well, I would say probably the most famous film is the film of Dracula. It was called Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it's got Gary Oldman and Winona Ryder. And I do think that does explore the Gothic elements of the story, but it's changed some of it makes it a romantic love story, and it's encouraging the audience to be more sympathetic towards Dracula, because he's portrayed as being quite sexy, quite very charismatic, and you could say maybe that's paving the way for the Twilight Saga and the rather more flattering portraits of vampires.
Yeah, so vampires have evolved from something.
They certainly have. I'm just having a swig of my wine and feel very restrained. So I'm going to have a huge gulp now.
Can I ask, do we know if at the time the book first came out, did it have a fan base at that time? I mean, like today, if a horror film comes out, occasionally we get sort of like kick-off. I was wondering, so at the time of the book being released, did it have like a fan base at that time? Like today, if we have a certain horror movie come out, sometimes you get obsessive fans, and you'll get copycat killings and things.
Not at the it's been more that Dracula's fan base has evolved over the course of the 20th century. See what I mean? It's something that's gained in popularity, and it's probably because obviously it was very much, when it was published, it was part of a recognised genre of like Gothic fiction. So it's something that particularly like the last century gained momentum, if you like, in terms of a fan base, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the students, what is the age of students that you teach this subject to today?
They're sixth form students, so 16 plus.
And how do they, I'm assuming if it was me, I would have absolutely loved this topic. Do they embrace do they love Dracula? How do they receive Dracula, the original Dracula?
Right. Quite a lot of the students don't like it. They think it's really, really boring, and they refuse to read it. Yeah.
Wow.
And we've had because they're not interested in fantasy or the supernatural.
Wow.
And we've had quite a battle to get them to read it, because they won't read it because it's too long. And it's interesting because if I was reading it at 16, I would have just been fascinated. However, there are some students that are absolutely mad about it. Yeah. And what it tends to be, the students that are Gothic, that like black clothes.
Emo kids.
Yeah, absolutely. They love Dracula. So you could say that it's never been mainstream, and this links back to Linzi's earlier question, that in terms of its original reception, it's always had a bit of a niche kind of following, because it's just not mainstream. And of course you could argue Gothic literature generally isn't mainstream, but it is for a bit of a niche audience. It's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's what I find, teaching it now, that some students, they adore it, but others, they absolutely hate it, and they get very embarrassed by all the sexual imagery in it.
Wow. Now, see, I would never have thought of it like that, but I guess, so that will be why Twilight and all of that they've been rewritten to portray vampires the way they have, because it's more
gentle.
It's gentle. It's more teenage friendly, and it's more acceptable.
Completely.
Yeah.
But it's weird though, because there'd be at least some of the students that I talked to because some of them had never heard of Twilight.
Really?
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
Mind you,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Twilight's
Never
not exactly...
didn't know what I was talking about.
It's not new,
Oh,
is
God.
it? It's Twilight.
How old is
Is it
Twilight?
90s?
Well, I think the thing is that what it pains me to say, a lot of it's like we were talking the other day about Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
You know, when Colin Firth was Mr. Darcy.
Oh,
well,
yes.
even to this day, with young women I teach English literature to, there's always some that are just in love with Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy.
they've got good
That is
taste.
something that really endures. But with the students that do English language and literature combined, they're not as interested. Not as interested, should we say.
Wow. Oh my God, they don't know what they're missing, do they?
I know. And they've got an exam on it a week on Wednesday, so yeah. Let's hope they do well. Yeah, otherwise I'll get sacked.
Good luck, kids.
I
need it.
They'd be crazy to sack you. Because
well, thank you.
If anybody's an expert on this topic, it's you. So,
Well, thank you.
Do they still do Mastermind these days, or is that all gone now as well? I don't remember that being...
No, it's still about.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
have you ever thought about going on to Mastermind on the TV and having Dracula as your specialist subject?
Oh gosh, I don't know about that. It's
Well-
a bit nerve-wracking.
Do you think? Well, how about we give it a little trial? Should we have a
I'd be up
little
for that.
test?
Yes, I'm up for it. I'm up for
Are you
for the
up for
challenge.
that?
Yes.
Okay. How about Linz? Are you? Do you fancy being?
Right.
Who's the presenter of Mastermind?
It used to be that Magnus Magnusson, but he died. So now it's
No.
Who is it now?
who is it? Who presents?
No idea.
No, I
It's
don't. I don't know.
I
that's
haven't
really
got a
annoying
clue.
because I do know, but it used to be Magnus Magnusson.
Right. So
but as
Lindsay,
I say, he's
Lindsay
no
can
longer
be,
with us.
Lindsay can be the Magnus Magnusson of
Okay.
Dead Creepy podcast tonight, and I think we should have 10 hot Dracula questions.
Question number 1. Right, who is Dracula said to have been inspired by? And I have got 4 choices for you. Lord
It's
Shep-
Henry Irving.
straight in
You
there.
didn't even wait for the multiple choice. Wow.
Fantastic. And who was Henry Irving?
Henry Irving was the Lyceum theatre guy.
Right.
Wow.
Okay. Question number 2. Which of the following countries does not border Count Dracula's castle? Transylvania, Moldavia, Hungary, or Bukovina? Oh no, how do you say that?
Bukovina. No,
Bukovina.
Bukovina. That's almost
answer
as
is
good as my
Hungary.
Leonis.
Hungary is the answer, Lindsay.
That's good because that's a geography question, isn't it? It's
Well,
not really
yeah,
about...
you see, I'm a jack of all trades, me. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right.
Walking geek, I am. Yeah.
Question number 3. Who warns Jonathan Harker as he approaches Castle Dracula?
It's the landlady at the inn.
Brilliant.
It's the landlady at the inn. Yeah.
Okay.
She crosses herself. And she says, "Don't go there, you lunatic."
Can you quote her exact line?
Something about "don't go there because you'll never come back." I can't remember the exact line.
Okay. She says, "Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway?"
Oh gosh.
Chills, right?
Chills,
through me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is chilling. It's chilling.
Right. Question number 4. In what disguise does Dracula first meet Harker?
He's a coach driver.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Question number 5. Which of the following descriptions is not applied to Dracula? Hairs on the palm, blood red eyes, extreme pallor, or pointed ears?
Blood red eyes.
Okay. Question number 6. What is the name of the ship on which Dracula travels to England? Which
he
is
goes
found
by.
of
Yeah,
crew.
and it's called. He's travelling from Varna in Bulgaria to Whitby on the east coast of England, and the ship is the Demeter or the Demeter.
Brilliant. Well done.
Wow.
Thank you.
Question number 7. What does Renfield, the insane man with a strange connection to Dracula, eat?
Some horrible things.
Right, the choices are worms, maggots and earwigs, spiders, flies and sparrows, blood or little girls.
It's spiders, flies and sparrows, and the name for Renfield is known as being zoophagus, and that's someone that eats spiders and insects.
Okay.
See, I'm a mine of information.
I don't want to meet him ever.
No. And he's horrible. Dracula has promised to give him more and more power, but Dracula ends up killing him, and there's this horrible red mist, and he's just spread all over the floor, and it's really gross.
Oh.
Right, question number 8. Who is the bloofer lady who preys on small children?
Lucy Westenra.
Oh, okay.
That's Lucy Westenra in her vampire persona. She's known as the Bloofer Lady, and she preys on young children and feeds on their blood. And when she's first sighted outside Hampstead Cemetery in London, she's clutching a child to her breast, and it's this parody of the mother image. So she's, got a child at her breast, but because she's feeding from it and drinking its blood, and when the Crew of Light intervene and the child goes on the floor, Lucy is crouching over it like a dog over a bone. And that is something that Claire referred to before about vampires being representing the unknown, but also them being animalistic.
Yeah.
So, yes, just
horrible.
slip that in.
Yes. Right. Question number 9. From where does Abraham Van Helsing arrive to help fight the plague of vampires?
Amsterdam in Holland.
Okay. Yeah, brilliant. Didn't even need to read out the choices. Okay, number 10. And the final question. How is Dracula finally killed? Is he slashed through the throat with one knife and simultaneously stabbed in the heart with another? Is he?
Yes, that's how he died.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's Quincy Morris. Quincy Morris with his special knife. So it's that one.
So he didn't get staked with his head cut off and garlic and no?
That's Lucy West. That's how Lucy Westenra died.
Wow. Wow. So, what's the final score then, Linz?
I'm pretty sure that was 10 out of 10. I might be wrong, but I don't remember you saying any answer.
I've just submitted the answers, and you got 10 out of 10.
Well,
congratulations!
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Fantastic.
A Dracula mastermind.
You are a Dracula mastermind. I'm afraid we don't have a cash prize to give away tonight, but we do have extra
I can be paid in wine. I'll be paid in wine. That's good enough for me.
You know what? We're all going to enter you into our prize draw that we're having at the moment to win a Star Trek cosplay top.
Oh, I would love to win that.
There you go.
And if you win it,
love to win it. Thank you
have
so
to
much.
teach your next Dracula class wearing it and take a selfie.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. I'd love that.
So we can't criticise
I think
anybody.
you should, yeah.
For
that. I think you should.
And I think a lot of people probably do. I think Dracula has to be one of the most popular dressing up characters at Halloween. And that's...
I think he does. Yeah.
I mean, that's saying something, considering how old is he now? 1879?
Well, he's over 100, isn't he?
120 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 120. Yes.
I worked that out at the beginning.
So actually, there could be somebody still alive today that is the same age as Dracula.
They'd be very old, though, wouldn't they? Oh, sorry, that's
120.
Yes, yeah.
Do you think there's somebody? There must be someone still alive that's 120. Do you reckon?
Yeah.
There might be. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, not that they'd remember
be
it
very old
because they would have been a baby, but it's absolutely fascinating topic. And
yes,
what's interesting to me is that vampires are still so popular today, but they seem to have a fashion. They've come in and out of fashion. And so from what you were saying about your students and their attitudes towards it right now, is that they've gone back out of fashion again just for now, but there's no doubt they're going to come back into fashion.
Yes. Yeah.
And you certainly know your vampires, Catherine.
Well, thank you very much. And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much to inviting me onto your show. It's been a delight.
We've loved having you. And I know the connection's not been fantastic tonight, but hopefully, everybody has really enjoyed listening to you. And I happen to know you have another topic of expertise, which is Frankenstein. So would you come back on the show and talk about Frankenstein?
I'd be delighted.
I would love to know more about Frankenstein. I really would.
Definitely.
Well, thank you very much. I'd be delighted to be a guest on the show again. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. And we're going to say good night. And
good night.
We'll talk to you again very soon.
I am Dracula.
Creepy.